are a good example. It's not going to fit everybody's situation. And so don't feel that what I say is necessarily the right or the wrong thing, but just an idea for you to think about on your own operation. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is a little bit about Todd.
I'm going to have to just keep using those dumb arrows down there.
There we go.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Todd Denveston. I am the owner of Dakota's Best Seed and DenBesten seed corn brand. I've lived all my life, born and raised in Platte here. Been farming on the side, I guess, outside the seed business on my own since about 2000. Currently have a good portion of my acres either in organic production or in middle of transition. And I guess I've been in the seed business all my life. My grandfather and my dad started the seed company back in the early 60s out on the farm, put up a seed cleaning plant in the Quonset there, and soon after that moved to town, sold the farm, and went full blown into the seed cleaning business at the time. So that's really where I've been and what I know. We have been adding to our team quite a bit, I guess, in the last couple years. Kind of brings up a quote that a friend of mine down in South Texas gave to Seed World magazine years ago. Said, "What was the smartest thing you ever did in your business?" And he said, "The smartest thing I ever did was surround myself with people that were smarter and better than what I am in doing what I do, and to get out of the way and let them do their job." I guess that's kind of my direction here, and I feel really good about our team that we're building. And I really feel like I have begun to surround myself with people that are better and smarter than I am, and I love to see their innovation and wisdom moving forward in a lot of different ways. So that's me, and that's in a nutshell who we are here. And go on to the next.
All right, so I tried to break this down today to really think about, so we're going to start out with probably the number one question that, Todd and I and many seed dealers will get is, what is the right population for my farm? And so, I think that really is the first and probably the most important decision that you'll make. Obviously, selecting the right hybrid with the right disease characteristics and different things is critical, but planning population is probably the one I get the most question on. And then there's always questions about, is this a flex or a fixed ear type? And we'll spend some time talking about those differences. We'll talk about leaf orientation. Definitely depending on what size or what row spacing you are in your operation has some effect on whether you want more of that vertical leaf or more of a horizontal leaf orientation. And in organic production, it's very critical as well. We have to have that shading effect to really help manage weed issues. And then we'll spend a little time, I often get the question, why should I use organic versus maybe non-GMO conventional untreated seed in my operation? And we'll talk about a few things with that as well. And then just some local farm testing. And this is probably going to be more of an ask from us, and helping get some additional on-farm real-world testing out there that we can all benefit from in the future. So, as we think about factors affecting planting population, obviously planting conditions, and I'm thinking more about the weather at this point. Are we coming out of a cold, wet spring? Are we coming out of a really hot, dry spring? There are a lot of different things we have to consider from a weather standpoint. And then that next thing is really the history of emergence. Do you, on your particular operation, have a lot of problem with seedling diseases? Maybe that's rhizoctonia or fusarium, or there's a ton of things that can go wrong. Or maybe you have an issue in the past with wireworm or a seed corn maggot or cutworms. All those things need to be considered as well. Tillage, if you are in an organic practice, tillage typically becomes pretty important for some operations. And, are you using more aggressive tillage before planting? And then are you using rotary hoe, tine weeders, flamers, different things after? The good thing about tillage practices following planting is that it does help control weeds very well, but we also lose some corn plants, some soybean plants when we do those tillage practices. Hybrid ear type, again, a flex versus a fixed ear type. That's going to need to be considered when choosing your planting population. And then finally, the yield potential. Everybody has on their operation, they have that farm that just performs better than some of the other ground that they have on their operation. And we need to understand that as we are picking our planting population. So I'm going to throw this population example out. Some of you on the call might say, man, Herb, that's a crazy amount of seed to throw out per acre. And there might be some of you say, well, that's actually a little low compared to what we're using. But for the sake of argument, today I'm going to throw out, let's say we set that planter for 34,000 seeds per acre. Now, the industry standard for germination, if you look at your seed tag, almost everybody has 95% on that germination portion of the seed tag. Sometimes it's less, but definitely and the only reason we would send out something that's less is because of a shortage in supply or some factor. But you'll definitely be notified if that's the case. So you can almost always assume that your seed is going to be at that 95% germination, at least from the DenBesten company. So right off the bat, if there's 5% of that seed in that bag that doesn't germinate, that's about 1,700 seeds per acre. So that's before you even open the bag of seed. You have to accommodate for that germination percent. The next thing is emergence issues. And I threw out 8% loss as a number. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. And so that equals about an additional 2,500 seeds per acre that we lose. So now all of a sudden, even though we started out at 34,000, we're already below 30,000 live active plants. And just like I said on the previous slide, we're losing things because of disease, insects, compaction, uneven emergence. I think, Todd, we were talking about it yesterday. The studies that show that if you have 3 corn plants in a row and one of those doesn't emerge until 24 hours after the other 2 emerge, typically that late emerging corn plant doesn't have nearly as good of yield potential as the 2 that emerged on time. So things to think about. And then of course the tillage issues. When I run across the field with a rotary hoe, a tine weeder, it's not uncommon to see a corn plant laying on top of the ground, or you pulled it out or you buried it. Same thing with a flamer. Sometimes a flamer will wrap up that corn whorl and it doesn't perform correctly. And then of course cultivators, they bury weeds, but sometimes they bury corn as well. And so I accounted for an additional 5% of stand loss because of that. So now we're down to 28,000. And, personally, I guess on our operation, my goal is always to kind of have that 28,000 plants out there. That's probably at times more than I need, but very seldom have I stood out in front of a cornfield and said, man, Herb, you got too many seeds out there. A lot of times I've stood out there and said, gosh, is 18,000 enough to really keep this, or do I need to tear it up and start over? And so to kind of, I looked around on the internet a little bit to really look at populations versus yield performance. And this comes out of the University of Minnesota Extension Program. And if you look on this slide, they really feel that, I'm going to use a pointer here so you can tell what I'm saying, looking at. What they saw in the study, and this was I think it was a 3-year study. It was 2009 through 2011. What they found when they accumulated that data was that really about 30,000 plants per acre on this particular farm in this particular situation really maximized their yield. If they had a higher population than 30, it didn't really improve yield, and obviously your expenses went up. However, if you were much less than 30, then all of a sudden you started cutting into your yield pretty dramatically. So I'm kind of a numbers guy, so bear with me. But if you have, so when I talk about harvest population, this is what the combine is touching. And obviously we have to plant higher than this number to get to this number. But from that previous chart, Minnesota said that at 30,000, they had 175 bushel per acre. And we're going to say that was the maximum potential for that field in that study. So in order to get the 30,000 harvest population, that final population, from all the things that I talked about earlier, germination issues, mechanical issues, you know, you probably wanted to plant about 35,500 seeds per acre. Now, if this is an organic situation, it's going to cost you right at $100 per acre. So some of you, maybe you've fallen off your chair now, and I'll give you a minute to get back up on your chair, but seed is a very expensive input to the operation. And you can go down the chart from here. So 27,000, we needed to plant about 32,000 seeds to get there at a cost of about $89 per acre, and so on and so forth. 21,000, we needed to plant just under 25 at a cost of right at 70. So about $30 less. And that's what this is showing here. So if we're at the final population of 30,000, it cost us right at $29, $30 more compared to a final population of 21,000. Or if we had a final of 27, it cost us $20 more than a final population of 21 and 9. The other side of the coin is the yield difference. And so we saw from that chart that the highest performing population was at 30,000 kernels per acre. And by doing that, that gave us the highest yield. And so as soon as our final population dropped, we lost about 5 bushel per acre. And I just used $7 per bushel. You know, thankfully the organic corn price is starting to recover pretty quickly. And so hopefully that's a low and one we don't see for a while. But compared to the low population, the higher population earned us an additional $119 per acre. And the 27 earned us an additional $84 per acre, and then $42 per acre. So then it really comes down to this. So it did cost me $30 more to get this population at the end of the growing season, but it gave me $119 more. So at the end of the day, I netted $90 more per acre. And that's huge. That's a lot of dollars. Yeah, it was a bigger investment up front, but at the end of the day, this is very good for my operation. And honestly, it came out to about a 3-to-1. So if I spent an additional dollar in seed up front, it earned me $3 on the end, at the end of the year.
Yeah, and I'll just interject a little bit. Obviously, full disclosure, we're in the seed selling business, right? So you say, oh yeah, they're trying to sell more seed. Obviously, I'd be lying if I said we wouldn't like to sell more seed. But what it comes down to is it's really a return on investment on your farm. Inputs going in have to give you profitability, increased profitability coming out. And we haven't talking about the population and just the yield advantages here, but especially in an organic system we haven't talked about yet. But it's your ground cover, it's your weed control that improves the more living growing plants you have out there. So there's other things than just your basic raw yield and return on investment that you see here. There's other things that'll factor into that as well.
Yeah, you're asking a lot more of those plants than you would in a different system.
Right.
Absolutely. And so that's a great segue into that next slide. So maybe you've never, seen how you really get your planting, how you get your stand population calculated. So after you plant, and you have plants that are fully emerged and you can count them, we have this chart, and this just comes out of a University of Nebraska seed catalog. It's nothing fancy, but if you're in 30-inch rows, and I'll get back to my pointer. If you're in 30-inch rows, what you would do is take a tape measure and measure out 17 feet 5 inches. And you're going to want to do this in several spots in that cornfield. But what you do when you have that staked out, that 17 5 inches staked out, just count how many corn plants you have in that distance. And let's say you do that and you have 30 plants that you counted. Your population at that point is 30,000 seeds per acre. There's 30,000 plants per acre. And then maybe we have some folks on the line that are in more of a narrow row situation. You go to a longer distance, or maybe you're in a wider row spacing. If you're in 36-inch rows, you actually do 14 feet 6 inches and count the number of plants in there, and that's your population. The other thing, and it goes to what Todd was talking about, crop canopy and weed control, is if we look at this chart on the right, if we had, that 21,000 population and we're in 30-inch rows, that meant our spacing is right about 10 inches between plants. And that's if everything's, nice and even, everything came up pretty consistently. If we're more in that 30,000 category, then we're down to just under 7 inches. And it might seem like a small amount, but it definitely aids in crop canopy and in the ability to manage weeds. I know personally, it's much easier to aggressively cultivate a field that has 30,000 plants than one that's teetering on, 20, 21,000, because you just really at that point can't afford to lose anything more from that plant or from that stand.
So if you're somebody like me that drives crooked when you're cultivating,
Yeah.
I spend a fair amount of time off the tractor, moving dirt off of my plants with my foot, right?
Stretch the hamstrings. You're out digging out rows. So that's, our discussion on population, and everybody's situation is going to be differently. If you expect on your operation 120 bushel corn, maybe 34,000 isn't the right number. But at the end of the day, even as I think of some of the toughest fields that I've ever been in throughout my career, I'd hate to see less than about 24,000 final. I think our soil is amazing on what it can do, and the hybrids today are amazing what they can do with not a lot to work with. And just having that good quality stand seems to really be the best scenario for a lot of people. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about flex versus fixed ear type. Obviously, I think most of us understand that the flex is really a hybrid that's able to adjust depending, regardless if the conditions are good and bad. And so if you look at the picture on the right-hand side, typically that flex year, when things are really good, there's going to be a little bit bigger, a little longer, where the ears on the right-hand side are a little shorter, but they're typically filled to the tip. And Todd and I talked about this yesterday. If you're planning, and this is another good test for your operation, whether you're planning enough population or not, but in a true flex hybrid, if you're filling out all the way to the very, very top, we probably could have had a few more plants out there. We probably were a little low in the population for this. It's almost nice to see it just a little bit of tip back where there's no kernels up here exposed. That just tells me, you maximize your population at that point. Fixed hybrids, they don't have the ability to elongate that ear to capitalize on good growing conditions. However, they typically do have that multiple ear trait in them. And so if you've ever seen, when you cultivate, not on my farm, but you'll see where there's a cultivator blight, right? There's a cultivator blight and there's this one lonely corn plant sitting out there. A flex ear is probably going to have a gigantic ear, where if you have a hybrid that's more of a flex, I've seen it where they put like 3 or 4 ears on that same plant. And that's truly how a fixed ear is trying to compensate. And then the other thing is just really understanding, if I've ordered a hybrid that has a strong flex to it, I can probably be on the lower side of that population. Or if I've got a hybrid that says it's fixed, we should probably be on the upper end of that population range. And, Todd, we talked a lot of the hybrids within the DenBesten catalog. Really, you tend to pick more of that flex type. And
yeah, I guess if you look at the corn seed industry as a whole over the last 15 to 20 years, there has been I guess there has been a pretty broad statement here, but the direction has been more of a fixed ear type plant, more of an upright leaf style that'll stand higher populations and need higher populations to be able to achieve the top end yields. I guess what we're trying to do here is really realizing that an organic system, those hybrids need to have different characteristics than what some of these conventional acres would be. So to be able to bring that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the leaf style and the canopy and things like that, but even the flexed ear, even if you have that population, you are going to have mechanical damage throughout the season. You are going to have spots in the field that are a little more difficult to deal with. So having that plant with the ability to elongate, to flex that ear, to help make up for some of that difference. Is that the fix all? No, but it's certainly going to help you in those situations where you need it. So we're trying to, I guess what I'm saying, we're trying to bring back some of the old characteristics from hybrids that you used to see when we were all younger. You can see they're a lot different just visually and in how they act than what they are today in a general way.
so another great segue by Todd is just talking about leaf orientation. And this is kind of a goofy example, but it was kind of the best thing that I could really pull up. And don't get, it's super tiny. You won't be able to see it decent. But really all it is a good visual to say, okay, are we picking plants that have a lot of leaf mass in the lower level? And all this is like a radiology test. So it's showing that most of the light absorption is happening right here in that crop canopy. Or if you get that, like Todd was talking, really upright, looks like a pineapple almost, you tend to have maybe a little more leaf or sunlight absorption kind of scattered throughout the plant. It's a little more jagged. We don't see a lot of like the top hybrid. That to me would be more of an open pollinated, big bushy top on it. And of course that would absorb most of the energy at the top, but just kind of a visual, one thing when I first started planting DenBesten seed corn is what Todd just mentioned, trying to get back to maybe some of the leaf characteristics that we haven't seen. Like you said, the industry's really said, we want a really tiny plant, be short, and we want it really scrunched together, and then we want to plant it at 50,000 seeds per acre. And that may work in high input conventional production, but I think also we need to consider about the organic side of the things, which is more wider rows. And we got to really work on getting good shading canopy. And so the DenBesten, I see a lot of differences as I look at our products in other people's plots where we do have more of that horizontal leaf canopy versus some of our competitors that are kind of more pineapple-ish. So the last thing, and May's kind of been attending, we're starting to see some buzz about 60-inch corn, ultra wide corn. And of course, they're using cover crops and different things in between the row to make sure that weeds are held at bay. But there's some neat things about this, and there's a lot of studies. I haven't participated directly in 60-inch corn, but definitely if you are on your farm, make sure that you are picking out that big old wide horizontal canopy. Make sure you're picking out one that has a good flex opportunity, because those characteristics I think will be, at least from the things I've read, are really important if you're looking at 60-inch corn.
See if there's any questions before
Okay.
I take over.
We're gonna just go backspace for a second to see if we're missing anybody's questions.
Yeah, just remember to find the little button that says chat. If you can't see the chat window already on your screen, we're keeping track of we're keeping track of questions. I haven't really had any so far, but we have time for a little discussion throughout the presentation today, or just save your questions for the end, and we can unmute you.
So either we've completely bored everyone and you're all asleep at your desk, or we've done such a fantastic job of explaining things that there aren't any questions. But please, yeah, if you go to the top bar, like May said, and then click on chat, and then you can write in your question if you have one. So with that, while we have, there we go.
Trying to
I'm gonna
switch the
scooch
controls
over
here.
a bit and let May talk a little bit.
All right, guys. Glad to see some faces here today, some brave souls that were on video. I've been working with Todd and the team here at Dakota's Best since last spring, and just wanted to share a little bit about my background. My title is Production Protocol Manager. I kind of do a little bit of everything these days, and it's been fun trying to adapt to some of the needs due to COVID, and try to keep the conversation going, and do some of these webinars. We'll keep going forward with these into the spring for sure. Before I came to Dakota's Best, I spent several years doing organic inspecting full time. So because of some of my experience with that, I try to help folks that are contemplating organic transition, or are trying to just improve their processes and their management going forward. How do I not laser? So you couldn't have a discussion about organic seed corn without talking about, what are the considerations per the organic regulation with why you would choose organic seed corn over a non-GMO hybrid. So I just wanted to throw out, this is the exact wording of the organic regulation about seeds and planting stock. So there's this conversation about if you can't or are unable to find an organic variety of any kind of seed, there is, or would call it a loophole. There's a option where you can demonstrate that what you're looking for isn't commercially available. And that's defined here to some extent. Where's the little doodad? That's weird. So when we talk about commercial availability in organic, there is a little bit of a difference certifier to certifier on how they interpret that regulation specifically. Most certifiers adopt a policy that requires a minimum of 3 options that a grower is required to demonstrate they pursued to try to find an organic variety if they ended up not using an organic variety. I think the conversation today is really different than even 5-7 years ago, as far as what's available seed wise as certified organic in this industry. It's really become more available. So to that point, I think there's 2 sort of main topics I try to talk to folks about when they're saying, well, conventional hybrids are cheaper, why shouldn't we just use those? And if you meet the requirements of a commercial availability search per your certifier, that's acceptable today. But I think if you look at the bigger picture of where we're at in the organic industry now, we just want to talk about how there's so many research needs on the organic corn and even organic crop production in general. We really have only scratched the surface on, what are the factors in the field influencing the health and development and the yield of these plants. So there's just starting to be some bigger research projects dedicated to this. Pictured here, you'll see a little screenshot of an article. This is a study that just got funded last fall. So hopefully we'll start to see more of this science coming available. But the other point I wanted to make too was, if we're not using organic inputs as a certified organic operation, what could that potentially start doing to consumer perceptions, which is such an important part of this industry? So again, the need for more research. This is a project where I haven't been able to find the results available online yet, but there's been several efforts out there to develop organic varieties that basically had a way of preventing contamination from your GM varieties of corn, preventing that cross-pollination. It's still work that's very much in process, but that's a real concern out there. We could do a whole other webinar on, some of the issues in GM traits coming into our organic varieties of corn. But here I just wanted to point out, the importance of those consumer perceptions. There's 82% of households in this country that have or are actively purchasing organic products. So that's a lot of people's perceptions to manage with such a complex management system like organic. And this is actually even old data. I think this is from 2016. So I'm sure as we get more information, especially after COVID, we're going to see that there's more US households purchasing these products. Are there any questions out there? Again, feel free to throw those in there. We got a couple. Chad had a question. Shouldn't we worry about purity on non-organic conventional seed? Absolutely. We have more buyers than ever before that are able to use the technology to spot test loads of organic corn coming to their facility. And maybe Herb can speak to this too. Each company might have a different threshold or a different tolerance for GM traits being present in that crop. Do you have any experience with that?
Definitely. In every, like May said, every buyer is going to have their own set of requirements. Some are going to be very strict, less than 0.5% of GMO contamination, if that. And as you get into the food grade scenario, that even gets more strict. So definitely making sure that you're working with a company that's providing good, high quality, non-GMO traded, organic or even conventional seed is very important to making sure you can capture that premium at the end of the year.
I mean, I think to your question there, Chad, there's work to be done on certified organic seed and conventional seed in general for, preventing some of those contamination issues. I think a lot of that just simply goes back to where that seed is raised, whether or not it's certified organic. I have heard of some organic hybrids even coming out of Europe just to ensure genetic purity. So it's a complex issue, and I think maybe even good topic for a future webinar.
I've got a question that I got texted to me. So, as we introduce new hybrids into the portfolio, often you get the question is, how new of a hybrid should you be using on your farm? Obviously there could be perceived some potential risk. This thing isn't tried and true for 5 or 6 years. I think the reality, and Todd can really expand on this, even though a hybrid is new to our portfolio, doesn't mean that it hasn't been run through the mill. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, that's true. And I guess, you look at it and, when you're putting hybrids together, you've got your male and your female. So you have familiarities with those traits that each one of those mother, father bring into the mix. And when you're looking at this, you're putting all these combinations together. You're looking at that, and you do look at them over time. Just because it says they're new to the portfolio that's being released now doesn't mean, like you said, haven't been looked at for a long time, years prior to that. I guess that's basically, and the testing we do, we run replicated third-party strip trials from North Dakota all the way through Illinois, down into southern Iowa, all the way across, moving east, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and you see, pretty soon if you have a mutt in the group that's not going to make the cut, so it's true. I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
So
I think the answer is, we have a lot of confidence in the hybrids that go into our portfolio, but just like in everything we do in agriculture, we need to spread out a risk. That's why we don't plant, last year's very best hybrid on every acre we own. And so I wouldn't encourage, a customer of mine to plant an entirely new portfolio every year. If we have one that's working well on the farm, we're going to stay with that one. But absolutely, we're going to start infusing the new ones as well, because eventually, just in reality, the changeover of germplasm in corn is changing so rapidly that it doesn't take too long for a hybrid that was really good 5 years ago to be kind of at the bottom of the pile now, because everybody else just came up, the bar was raised that much further. So great question, Pete. Thanks.
Yeah, there's definitely more, not only for us and how you see our lineup expanding, 77-day organic all the way up through 113-day and everything in between, but you can see how the industry really is starting to spend more time and put more effort into having lines that are usable in an organic environment. And there's a lot of factors that come into that, and a lot of different gene pools that you can pull from. And some of those are a proponent of an organic system. Some of the seed suppliers out in the world are definitely not for that, and they don't have that in the mix of things they're offering to the general public, and they won't.
Yeah.
They don't want that part of the industry to succeed. Quite honestly, it's traits and it's traits and it's traits.
Yeah.
So, but you can see that starting to shift some, with more emphasis put on inbreds that'll work in an organic environment, and that's encouraging.
Absolutely.
And that's why we've been allowed to expand our lineup year to year, offering more hybrids in a wider maturity class.
While we're on it, if you look throughout, so back in 1994, when I started, we first became certified organic. Literally, there was pretty much one company, NC Plus Organics, at that time that had organically produced seed corn. And as much as and as hard as they tried, sometimes production problems happened. And back in that day, if somebody had a production problem, there literally was not going to be enough organic seed to meet the needs of growers. And I appreciate when that loophole, that's probably not the word, but that loophole that allowed us to plant something else, because we would have been in a world of hurt that we couldn't. It's just exciting to look at the industry today and how many people, maybe they've always been a traded company and now they're offering one or two organic hybrids. It's interesting to see how much more interest there is in the organic seed market. I will say that, I've been doing the seed thing for a long time. I've planted a lot of people's organic seeds, so I know their portfolios, and I think we have one of the deepest and most diverse organic corn lines and conventional. So we're not gonna, I know there's people on the call today that are not organic and don't have any intention to go in organic. we have some really fantastic, just straight conventional hybrids out there as well. And sometimes there's some great premium markets for that going forward. So.
Well, on that note too, we had a question come in, asking, do we have a difference in how we handle genetic purity issues or potential contamination issues on our conventional line versus our organic line? Or is it just a matter of, the geography of where that seed stock is grown, and if it's on a certified organic operation, they're taking precautions?
Yeah, that's a good point. On the organic side of the production, very first thing you start with is clean seed stock. And that's a challenge in the world where they're producing, and doing increases on multiple lines in different parts of the country, not only for us, but for the industry. To be able to find those isolations in the seed stock producing areas that are clean and pure is a challenge. So you have to test your seed stock before you ever plant a seed field to ensure that you're starting as clean as possible. And then, of course, isolation from there is a key component. The places that we've chosen to produce the seed corn have been selected for that specific purpose of isolation and surrounded by trees and miles from any possible infestation. But we also do that with our non-GMO corn. We also start with as clean a seed stock as we can. We make sure that we have production that can be isolated from the rest of the production that's happening around us. And that's very important. So even our non-GMO is as pure as it can be.
Good.
And yeah, that's important, and that it's what we start. You need to start clean.
Of course, we wanted to hit on these kinds of questions as well, since, it's definitely a big part of the conversation, at least to us, that's important to respond to, is trying to understand why organic seed costs more. And I think we had some points we wanted to share on that. What's sort of the biggest reason, do you think?
Well, there again, it starts with seed stock. To produce pure, unadulterated seed stock is vastly more expensive than it is to plant it and not worry about it if it's getting infested with GMO. So it starts there. But you have the same challenges in your seed production fields as every farmer does in their commercial production fields. You have the same options for weed control. You have the same options for fertility. All those challenges that we all see in an organic system, you have the same challenges in seed production fields. No difference. In effect, it's about twice as expensive to grow an organic seed than it is a conventional. So if you look at, why is my organic twice as much as my conventional? That's where it's at.
That's the short answer.
That's the short
Well,
answer.
and honestly, as a grower myself, if I wanted to grow seed corn, obviously there's an opportunity cost. If I can get $7 from my organic yellow corn, I'm going to expect basically that same amount of net return from raising seed corn production. And so it's just an automatic, it's just what it is. It's great. It's a reason, one of the many reasons that we farm organically. There are premiums in the industry, but because of that, then some of our inputs have premiums on them as well. So the one thing that always gets me, and maybe this was true, 5 and 10 years ago, that I've had people come to me and say, Herb, you know what? The organic industry is so far behind on hybrids, they just can't compete today. That's why I want to use conventional untreated seed in my organic operation. And I'm not, it's a touchy situation, but honestly, if you look at the DenBesten catalog with all of the third-party plots that Todd mentioned not too long ago, what I did, I took the time, and you'll see in those third-party plots, we have a lot of DenBesten, both organic and conventional hybrids. And then we also compared against Pioneer and DeKalb. And we let that third-party plot cooperator pick out those DeKalb and Pioneer. Supposedly they're some of their best genetics that they have in their portfolios today. And what I did, it wasn't purely scientific. What I tried to do is, and you can go through the plots in the seed catalog. This bar chart comes directly out of the book. And so I picked out 68 of these plots. I think in the book, there's close to 72 of them. Some of them I didn't have DeKalb and Pioneer in. But if you go through and you say, okay, here's the DeKalb, and maybe there's a DenBesten, and then here's the Pioneer, you can really look at how the organic and conventional DenBesten did against what the industry would say are some of the biggest and greatest, breeding programs in the industry. So if you look at this chart, yeah, good point.
Here.
I'll set up my pointer, so instead of pointing with my finger, which I'm sure
You can't
you
see
all-
where we're pointing.
you all appreciate so much. Okay, so what this is showing, so this is the accumulation of 68 plots in 8 different states. And the white bar is DenBesten organic specifically. DeKalb is the orange, and then kind of the yellowish is Pioneer. Now, before we get into the details, remember when we do these third-party plots, the organics are going in as untreated seed. Everything else is not. It has the commercial insecticide, fungicide product on it. Plus, a lot of the DeKalb and Pioneer used in here had traits. So it had BT tolerance, it had Roundup Ready tolerance, it had whatever in it. So we need to really take that into consideration. If you compare a seed that has absolutely no seed treatment on it versus a hybrid that has both, the latest and greatest insecticide, fungicide, and product on it, that's a huge difference. I mean, that's probably at least 10 bushel, if not 20 and 30 in some situations. And you'll see that in the third-party plots at the top of most of them, it says when it was planted and when it was harvested. And you'll see that the planting date was much earlier than probably most of us as organic growers plant our crop. And so by no means the organic hybrids in these plots were given a head start at all. And you can see that as you look at the white line through these bar graphs, I mean, we're trending right with the stuff that had seed treatment, it had traits, it supposedly has the best breeding program in the world. We're right there. If like for this instance here, if the yellow line drops off, that means I didn't have a Pioneer in the next couple plots. But then when all 3 of them are there, all 3 were competing each other in the same plot. So nobody has the perfect corn portfolio. And that's obvious. If I was selling Pioneer, I would have to say that. If I was selling somebody else's product, I would have to say that. Nobody has perfect hybrids for every farm. And when I see data like this, it just reaffirms how far the organic hybrid, just the ability of organic hybrids have come in the last 26 years since I've been in this. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Todd, but that was a little bit of a soapbox. Sorry, I wasn't meaning to preach on this, but it is true. And I think there's that perception that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I would say that I hear that all the time as well. And like Herb said, in history that probably stood true. And it's the reason that we do the research that we do, the reason that we work at it as hard as we do, because we need to erase that truth that may have been there before. And I think we've done a good job. I think we're coming. Will we keep improving? Absolutely.
Honestly, it falls on our shoulders too, to make sure that we have good data so that you can make good decisions for the right hybrids for your farm. And so we're going to put a lot of effort into making sure that our dealers, myself, we all know our products well enough so that we're making good recommendations for your farm. And honestly, that comes, kind of to my last slide of this morning. The hour really went fast. Is if anyone on the call, we're always looking for growers, conventional or organic growers, willing to do some plot work with us. And I don't need the 37 trial, 37 different hybrids in one block. I know that takes a huge amount of time, and it's stressful and it's hard to do. But if you can give us a 4 hybrid plot, or if you can give us a good side-by-side with the technology that we have in combines today, it's super easy to get really good yield data. And honestly, I'm happy with a 40 that's split between 2 hybrids, because to me, that's a huge data set. And it's probably more real world than if we do a 500-foot block next to another 500-foot block. It's just going to give us good data. We want both, because in the smaller blocks, it's easier to do multiples. And we're more than happy to go up against any of the competition that's out there in the industry today. We need more good data against other organic seed companies as well. And so if you're interested, just please reach out to any of us and we'll definitely get you set up. We have good supply of plot seed. There won't be a charge for you to use that on your operation. So I encourage you to take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's been a difficult thing, and anybody that's looked for organic test plots, organic corn data, it's hard to come by. And I think the industry as a whole, not just us, but the industry as a whole struggles with that.
Yeah.
It's hard to get those in place, get usable data off of their trial, and so yeah, I mean we want all we can get.
And I'll be the first to admit, we've done a bad job in the organic industry, like Todd said, of really pushing that type of plot data. But it's really my goal and my initiative that we're going to change that. We're going to do a better job of making sure that you have the information to make better decisions for your operation. And that's just good for everybody. So with that, I don't know, May, do we want to?
You got 2 more slides.
Okay, I was gonna skip through.
Okay.
I did have a couple slides in here just to kind of fill in if we were running a little short on time. But a lot of times we'll get questions, or some people are very adamant that I have to have a round seed size or a flat seed size. In reality, there's been a lot of university work, a lot of independent work on this over the years. Every kernel has basically the same genetic potential that comes off that ear. What definitely is more important is how we're getting that seed into the ground. And so if your planter is specifically set up for rounds, absolutely, we got to use rounds, because that will give us better singulation. That will get us closer to that perfect population that maximizes our yields. Or if your planter has the ability to adjust, has different adjustments that you can, go from a large seed to a small seed, or a round seed to a flat seed. We just need to really take that additional 15, 20 minutes to make sure that our planter is set. Because honestly, we talked about this yesterday. If we start out with a bad population, it really doesn't matter what happens. We can dump all the fertility on there. We can do the best job of weed control, but we're pretty limited of what's going to happen on that field if we start out with a bad population.
You've determined your potential the day you plant that seed.
So it's so important that we just take that additional time to make sure we start as good as we possibly can. And then the last thing is, cold versus warm germination tests. It's a huge thing, especially for the organic industry, to make sure that we have hybrids that are capable of withstanding that cold, wet snap that sometimes we get. Same is true in the conventional and the traded world. Emergence is really critical, and everything that we have here at DenBesten does get its cold and warm germination test, just to make sure. And we're not going to send out anything that doesn't make the standards that we've set for our products. And so rest assured that those tests are being done. Typically samples are always kept back, and we'll continue to test if there's anything that looks iffy. But we're making sure that we're sending out the highest quality seed that we can. All right. So just to kind of wrap up, again, this is my my ask. If you guys have any interest in doing side-by-sides, or if you know somebody that would be good at doing that, please send us some information. My last slide is really, and this is where you can reach us. You can call, email, whatever. So like I started out this Fridays on the Farm, we do record all of these webinars. And so if you missed last week's, I'd encourage you to go to YouTube. And if you search Organic Farm Team, a bunch of our previous webinars or recordings will pop up, and you can go back and go through that. So just to give you a little preview of what's happening next week. Next week, we're going to have Drew Foster, who is our fertility expert. He's really going to be breaking down fertility in organics and talking about some of the science behind the biologicals that are out there. We all know that there's so much that the industry, that's probably one of the other huge changes that I've noticed throughout my time in organic is there are so many things and everybody's got the greatest thing. And it really, it's coming down to, we're going to try to help sort through that so that you can have confidence that, yeah, you know what, we use this product and we typically see a kickback by using it, or man, we've tried this product multiple times and we just can't get a return on our investment. So we want to make sure that we're doing a very good job of being honest and providing you the products that are going to benefit your operation. So please tune in next week again at 11 o'clock. It'll be the exact same link that you used to join this morning. And May, do we have any final questions we should touch on?
No, I think, I just wanted to throw it out there too, that we're still finalizing our schedule for February and March. And, we'll see if it gets a little too crazy around here, we might have to put a pin in our webinars for the growing season. But definitely, if you have ideas, questions, things you've been thinking about, you want to know more about, email me, or you can even leave a message for me via our website with any topics of discussion you'd like to see. Not all these webinars will be a full hour of presentation. We had a lot to talk about today. Some of them will just be a lot more room for networking, discussion. I think everyone's still getting used to the Zoom life a little bit too. So don't be shy. Thank you, everybody.
And I'd be remiss if you don't have all of your seed bought for the farm for this coming growing season. Please give us a call. We'll be glad to sit down with you and pick out some good products, whether it's corn, soybeans, alfalfa, or the various cover crops, small grains. We still have a good supply of seed in our inventory, so we'd be more than happy to have that conversation with you. With that, Todd, do you have any closing comments?
I want to thank everybody for being here. This is the first one of these that I've ever done, so it's a new thing for me as well. We encourage you to come back again. Next Friday we'll have different topics, different things to talk about. Basically the same group, but we're going to bring in some other experts that can talk about the fertility side of it next week, and we're pretty excited about that as we're starting to move more into that arena, as well as offerings that we're bringing to the growers. And I did want to make sure that we've got a nice ad there on the organic team. We're having our summit here in Platte in our community center, March 5 and 6. We're going to have some really good speakers there, some nice exhibits there, and it should be a pretty good show. We're going to shoot for limiting to around 200 people. That's about what we can fit with distancing and whatnot that we need to do. And we're going to have a really good meal. We're going to do some bowling afterwards, I think, for people that want to bowl in a nice small town bowling alley. So it'll be kind of fun. We just encourage everybody to come out for that and get signed up for that so you get your spot. So.
All right, everyone, have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. I know that there's some snow out in different parts, but we'll look forward to seeing you all next week.